Listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. On today's episode of the podcast, we preview the Test series between England and India. It's the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast, and let's get started. Let's have a look at the fixtures for this Test series between England and India. The first Test match at Trent Bridge on the 4th of August, the second Test match at Lord's on the 12th of August, the third Test match at Headingley on the 25th of August, the fourth Test match at the Oval on the 2nd of September, and the fifth Test match at Old Trafford on the 10th of September. Let's have a look at both squads for the England and India Test series. We'll start with England's Test squad for the first two Test matches. Root, Anderson, Bairstow, Bess, Broad, Burns, Butler, Crawley, Sam Curran, Hamid, Lawrence, Leach, Overton, Pope, Robinson, Sibley, and Wood. India's Test squad: Kohli, Rahane, Agarwal, Ashwin, Bumrah, Esawan, Jadeja, Shami, Siraj, Pant, Patel, Pujara, Rahul, Saha, Ishant Sharma, Rohit Sharma, Shaw, Thakur, Vahari, Umesh Yadav, and Suryakumar Yadav. So that's England's and India's Test squads for this Test series. Let's talk about and have a look at some of the challenges that England will face in this Test series against India. First of all, no Chris Woakes, Jofra Archer, Ben Foakes, Ollie Stone in this England side. They're all being ruled out due to injury. Ollie Robinson returns after his ban from the ECB. We all know why he was banned, for obvious reasons. He comes back in. Josh Butler returns. Sam Curran returns along with Johnny Bairstow after they were rested in the against the Test series against New Zealand due to playing in the IPL. They were rested, so they come back into the Test side for the India series. The one big absence for England in this Test series against India, and it's been well known now in the news, is Ben Stokes, who's ruled himself out of the Test series due to personal reasons, mental health and well-being. This is a very serious issue, and it's an issue that I'm passionate about. Someone who's gone through mental health issues before, I understand how Ben feels. And I just wanted to speak about this before we get into the challenges that England will face in this Test series. This is a serious issue and we need to talk about it. I commend Ben Stokes for speaking out about his mental health. I think it sends the right message to people who are going through their battles with mental health, that it's okay to speak up and it's not weak to speak. That's the stigma that's attached with mental health, especially men, because most men will not go and see a doctor for men's health, will not speak up about that. They will not speak up about mental health and talking about their problems and feelings. That's the stigma that we need to break, because we need to break that stigma because we just need to, because mental health affects everyone. Now, everyone's going through a tough time in this current situation at the moment. We're all going through our troubles. We're all feeling sad, a bit down, and we need to look after our mental health. What I'll say about cricket players in particular is that they're sacrificing a lot, and we tend to forget as fans that they're people as well. It doesn't matter if they're cricketers. It doesn't make any difference that they're cricketers. They're people. They're human beings. They feel emotion, feelings. They go through the same things as everyone does. They're sacrificing a lot to play cricket for our entertainment and pleasure, because they're doing this to give us at home something to look forward to be happy about. And that's what cricket does. Without the players, we don't have cricket at all. We wouldn't be here talking about the England and India Test series and previewing that, because without the players. The players go through a lot of pressure, a lot of anxiety, a lot of worries. And it does get to them. And it is a tough sport, cricket. You often feel lonely. Most of these players don't see their families for weeks and months because they're playing cricket, especially during this current situation, which is why we need to acknowledge and respect players who pull out of series and not criticise them for doing that. We've seen in recent weeks and months, many sports people and athletes have pulled out of tournaments, like Naomi Osaka in tennis, and the gymnast from America, Simone Biles from America, who's just pulled out of competition in the Olympics. They're speaking out about mental health, and they are changing the narrative, and they're changing the stigma to say it's okay to speak about your feelings. And they're encouraging other people to do that, which is fantastic. And we need to respect that as cricket fans as well, with Ben Stokes and other cricketers who are doing the same thing. Because at the end of the day, as I said before, they're people, they're human beings. And someone who's gone through their mental health issues, like myself, it is a hard place to be in. And I understand how Ben is feeling at the moment. I can relate to him. He's going through a tough time at the moment. But at the end of the day, I just hope he's okay. And I hope everyone hopes he's okay. And that's the important thing. We hope that Ben's okay and is on the right track. He's got his family there to support him. And his teammates as well will be checking in on him as well. So at the end of the day, mental health is a serious issue. We've got to talk about it. We've got to bring awareness to it. We've got to break the stigma down. It's okay to speak up. It's okay to seek help. And there are many fantastic organizations that will help you in terms of dealing with your mental health and well-being, especially here in Australia and all other countries in the world as well. So if you are struggling and you need a bit of help, please reach out. Please speak to someone, whether it be your family, friends, a doctor, someone who you can trust. Just pick up the phone, or they'll say, hey, I'm struggling, I need some help. That's the best thing to do. And I can tell you from experience, speaking about this is beneficial. It does help, makes you feel better, loads better. And we need to encourage people to speak out about this, because it's a serious issue and it's affecting everyone in the world at the moment. And it's just a reminder that we need to look after ourselves. So we did an episode on mental health in cricket on the podcast previously. I invited my cricket coach on for a cricket discussion, and we talked about this at length. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. Please watch that. It will open your eyes up about mental health and make you think about things that you never thought you'll think about before, about mental health and well-being. And we talked about some of the ways you can improve your mental health and some of the ways that you can control it and seek help and all that stuff. So please watch that. I really recommend that for people who are struggling, to please watch that and to really look after themselves at the end of the day. Obviously, going back to Ben Stokes, I wish him all the best. I hope he's on the right track. I hope he's doing well. I just want to see him get back out there playing cricket soon in the near future. But I think we all wish him the best, and hopefully we see him back on the park in the near future. Let's talk about some of the challenges that England will face in this Test series against India. And I think the biggest challenge that England will face in this series is their batting, is how they score runs against India's quality bowling attack. Now, England's batting's been a real concern of late in their Test side. I'm talking about Burns, Sibley, Crawley, Pope and Lawrence. All their spots are not certain in this England side. Big series for them, need to score runs. Now, in the last series against New Zealand, Burns scored 238 runs, Sibley 103, Crawley 21, Pope 84, Lawrence 81. Now, Burns scored a century in that series. That was at Lord's in the first Test match. Sibley scored a half century, Lawrence a half century as well in that series. No half centuries to Crawley and Pope. So that series was only a 2-game series, but the century from Burns and the half century from Sibley and Lawrence don't count towards anything. That does not make a summer. That does not guarantee you a spot in the Test side. It's only one Test series. It does not make a summer. They need to do it on a consistent basis, and they haven't been doing that for a long time. Also, England's batting in that series against New Zealand, some alarming stats is that they only had 6 50-run partnerships in that Test series against New Zealand. That's just not good enough. That doesn't win you Test matches or Test series in that fact. And they had 0 100-run partnerships as well in that series. The highest partnership for England in that series was 93 for the third wicket between Burns and Root in the first Test match at Lord's. So England have some work to do to turn those numbers around. That should have been 6 100-run partnerships, not 6 50-run partnerships. So they really need to work on that, England, going forward in this series. But going back to Burns, Sibley, Crawley, Pope and Lawrence, if they fail in this series against India, then I'm afraid England will have to look elsewhere. You've got Darwin Milan waiting in the wings, along with Hamid. Johnny Bairstow is back into the Test side. You've got other batsmen that England can call on to be in the side for this series against India, but also for the Ashes later on this year. Joe Root and Josh Buttler, who are going to be two of England's main batsmen in this series, especially for the first two Test matches, and without Ben Stokes, they're going to do most of the heavy lifting. And it's up to Burns, Sibley, Crawley, Pope, Lawrence to really step up and start getting the job done for England. This series against India is their last chance. How many chances do you give them? How long is a piece of rope? When does it start to become an issue where they're not scoring runs on a consistent basis and you've given them so many chances? When do you draw the line and say, that's it? You're not doing the job. We've got to say goodbye. So really, this is where they need to stand up. This is a big series for them. If they want to be in that Ashes squad for England in Australia, they've got to have a big series here against India. They need to show people that they deserve to be here and that they have gone away and learned and reflected after the New Zealand Test series and hopefully let their bat do the talking by scoring some runs. That's what they need to do, Burns, Sibley, Crawley, Pope and Lawrence. Most people are criticising them, and rightly so, due to their lack of form and poor batting of late. But for those batsmen in particular, just need to block that out. Yep, okay, people will have their own opinions about your batting and techniques, especially with Burns and Sibley in particular, with their unorthodox techniques and methods. But that's how they play. And I think we should embrace that. In cricket, not everyone has the same technique. You have fundamentals that are the same, but everyone has different philosophies and methods that they'll like to do with their batting. And with Burns and Sibley, they are batting their way. And I don't think they should be too disheartened by people criticising their techniques. If it's worked for you in the past, then keep with it. But if you have some fundamental flaws that need to be addressed, then you have to fix them and probably make some changes to your technique. But what I'm saying is they need to believe in themselves and just go out there and bat and try your best. That's the main thing. And just believe in yourself because they're all talented players. You know, they wouldn't be chosen in this England side if they weren't talented or had the skills. They have the skills, but they haven't been translating those skills onto the cricket field. And they need to do that in this series against India. So what do England need to do to improve their batting in general in this series against India? Well, it's going to be tough against India's bowlers. They're quality. You've got the likes of Ishant Sharma. You've got the spin attack of Jadeja and Ashwin. You've got Mohammad Siraj, Mohammad Shami, Jasprit Bumrah. It's going to be a tough time of it facing those bowlers. So I think England need to take a leaf out of New Zealand's book, find a way to get through the tough periods, be mentally tough, back up partnerships, be patient, put a high price on your wicket, show some fight and discipline with the bat, believe in yourselves, and don't play reckless shots and be responsible with your batting. That's what England need to do to start turning their batting woes around in this series against India. If England can get their batting together and start to score runs on a consistent basis and put themselves into good positions, and if their bowlers can bowl in the right areas and put India's batsmen under pressure, then they may win this Test series. Let's talk about India and what's some of the challenges that they will face in this Test series against England. Well, the biggest challenge for India is their batting, how to bat and how to score runs against a quality England bowling attack in terms of Broad and Anderson. You got Mark Wood, you got Ollie Robinson with pace. So it's going to be very difficult for the Indian batsmen, especially if they're presented with pitches that have a bit of grass and assisting the bowlers quite heavily. which is no surprise in England, and that will happen in this series. I wanted to point out what Ajinkya Rahane said. Ajinkya Rahane said to the media recently, he said, "We expect England to give us such wickets. This is their home conditions. We're not going to think too much about it. It's all about playing good cricket, and it's the same for them as well. If we can get used to the conditions and to the wicket quickly, we'll play accordingly to that." He then went on to say, "We are not too worried about what wickets they are giving us. We are ready." And I think that's the right mindset that India need to take in this series. At the end of the day, you can't control what pitch is prepared for you for the test match. You have to play on that surface, and vice versa for the opposition as well. It is a big challenge for India to really get used to these conditions where the ball's swinging around. We saw in the WTC they struggled a bit against New Zealand's quality attack under overhead conditions. So it's very important for them to really find a way to get in and get set and really find a way to score runs in these difficult conditions. What I saw in the WTC final with India's batsmen is that all of their batsmen found ways of dealing with the swing and the seam. For example, they batted out of their crease to nullify the swing and the seam movement, which is a good way of dealing with that in England. But as I said before, that India need to show that mental toughness, resilience, and find a way to bat on these difficult surfaces. They will be tested, with Anderson and Broad in particular. Then you've got Mark Wood and Ollie Robinson with the pace, which will hurry them up, I should say, as well. So they really need to find ways to get through the tough periods and the tricky periods. If they can do that, then put some runs on the board, and then as we get towards the back end of the test matches, with their bowling attack, and if the pitches get a bit tired and worn, and that grass starts to burn off and resembles a wicket that you'll see in India, then that will heavily favour India in terms of their bowlers, in terms of conditions as well, with uneven bounce and spin. So if they can put runs on the board and towards the back end of the test match, the pitches get a bit tricky, then they're in a good place to hopefully put some pressure on England and hopefully win some test matches and probably win the series overall as well. The other challenge that they'll have is who's going to replace Shubman Gill in terms of opening the batting with Rohit Sharma. Now, there's 3 candidates that are likely to replace him, but you can cross 2 of them out. We'll start with Agarwal. You can cross him out straight away because he's been ruled out of the first test match due to concussion. He received a nasty blow on the head by a nasty bouncer by Mohammad Siraj. Obviously not Siraj's fault. Obviously, wrong place at the wrong time for Agarwal. Unfortunately, he's been ruled out due to concussion and will not take any further part in this first test match. He was the likely candidate to replace Rohit Sharma, but you can put a line through his name, he's not going to play. Prithvi Shaw's the other one, but you can put a line through his name as well because he's just played in Sri Lanka for India in the limited overs tour over there. Obviously, coming back from Sri Lanka to England, has to do all the protocols and all that stuff, so he won't be considered for the first test match. So you can cross him out. The likely candidate to replace Shubman Gill at the top of the order is KL Rahul. He's batted at test level, opening the batting before. He's scored some centuries at test level. He knows what to do. He's the likely candidate to replace Rohit Sharma. So that's pretty much an easy selection for India there in terms of who will replace Shubman Gill. It's unfortunate that Shubman Gill had to miss out, obviously, due to injury. He's a young player. I like the way he plays. He's a promising player, and hopefully we see a lot more of him in the future. But just unfortunate with the injury here. It would have been a big series for Shubman Gill. Now, I've highlighted 2 batsmen who will be important for India in this series. They are Cheshwar Pujara and Virat Kohli. Both of them have been struggling and haven't quite batted at their best in recent times. We'll start with Cheshwar Pujara first. He's been struggling for the last 2 years. Now, the last 2 years of the World Test Championship, he's scored 841 runs at an average of 28.03 with 9 50s in the last WTC cycle. That's not the Cheshwar Pujara that we know. Not quite up to his standards. He hasn't scored a century in a while. He's very important for India because he's the anchor role of the Indian batting order. If India have a batting collapse, they need someone to hold the batting order together, be the anchor. And Pujara, he does that for India. I think why Pujara is struggling, I think it's because the way he's been batting. The way he's been batting, that old school mentality of being responsible, taking time to get in and get set, that's not doing India any good either. Now, I like the way he bats. Obviously, he bats responsible, and that's how, for example, like Jeffrey Boycott used to bat from England. You know, he used to bat all day and used to take his time, and Cheshwar Pujara is doing the same thing. But I think at times it does have an effect on the team in terms of scoring runs. At the end of the day, cricket is about scoring runs as a batsman. You need to score runs and keep the scoreboard ticking over. I think with Pujara, with him not scoring, it's getting himself bogged down, and therefore bowlers can bowl to him and all of a sudden he gets out and that's it. So I think he needs to be a bit more aggressive in terms of running between the wickets and looking to score runs at a regular rate. Now, we don't worry about strike rate all that much in Test cricket. It's not about the strike rate, it's about how long you can bat for. But I think at times with Pujara, he needs to lift his scoring rate a little bit. What I've noticed is that he's aggressive to the spinners using his feet, which puts the spinners off in terms of their lines and lengths, and they need to redirect their lines and lengths. But he's not aggressive to the quicks. He sort of sits back to the quicks and really is patient and waits for the right ball. So I think if Pujara changes that in this series against England, I think we may see Pujara return to his best. He just needs to be a bit more aggressive, that's all. But I like the way he plays, but he just needs to be a bit more aggressive. There's an old saying, form is temporary, class is permanent. He's got class, Pujara. He's a class player. He's just out of form, and he needs to rediscover that form again in this series against England. The other batsman I highlighted is Virat Kohli. Now, he hasn't been scoring runs. He hasn't been scoring the big runs, I should say, of late. Hasn't scored a century for a long time. Like Pujara has been struggling, but he's got some 50s along the way, but he hasn't really got the big score. Now, the last series in England in 2018, he scored 2 centuries and over 500 runs, but India lost the series 4-1. So he'll be looking to get a big score in this series against England. He'll be very determined to lead from the front, and he's such an important batsman for India. Along with Pujara, those are the 2 batsmen to really get India out of trouble if there's a batting collapse. If they're batting on a difficult surface and England get on top with a few wickets and wickets start to tumble, those 2 need to be in there for India to get them out of trouble. So Kohli, it's very important for him to be the guy to get India over the line. So I'm tipping Kohli to get back into form in this series. As I said before, class is permanent, form is temporary. And Kohli's a class player. He's just out of form like Pujara, and hopefully if he can rediscover that form in this series, then India are a good chance of winning this series overall. The final challenge that India will face is how will their bowlers back up 5 test matches. Now, it's going to be hard backing up 5 test matches back to back to back to back. So we may see some rotation there. We saw in the World Test Championship final, they struggled because of the lack of preparation before that game against New Zealand. But since then, they've got some overs in the legs. They've been getting some match practice in terms of playing a tour match against a county 11 just recently. I think their bowling will be fine. I think their bowling attack is fine. They can take 20 wickets, and I think we'll see the Indian bowlers back and firing in this test series against England. If India can bat well and find a way in difficult conditions and put some runs on the board to give their bowlers something to bowl to, and if the pitches get a bit tricky with spin and uneven bounce, then their bowlers will be in the game. And India are a good chance to win this test series. Let's have a look at the test stats between England and India in test matches. Head-to-head in test matches overall, England 48, India 29. Both teams' records in England in test matches, England 34, India 7. Leading run scorer, Sachin Tendulkar with 2,535. Leading wicket taker, James Anderson, 118. Most dismissals, MS Dhoni with 67. Most catches, Alistair Cook with 38. Most matches, Sunil Gavaskar with 38. And the first test match that England and India played was back in 19 32. So those are all the stats in test matches between England and India. Let's preview the first test of the series between England and India from Trent Bridge. Talk about the potential 11s for both teams and who's going to win this first test at Trent Bridge. Let's have a look at the test record at Trent Bridge between England and India. First test match played between these two countries was back in 1958 here at Trent Bridge. They've played 7 matches. 3 of them have been draws. England have won 2 and India have won 2. Let's have a look at both teams' potential 11s for the first test match. We'll start with England. Burns, Sibley, Crawley, Root, Pope, Lawrence, Butler, Leach, Robinson, Wood, Broad and Anderson. If conditions are in favour of the seamers and we do get a green top at Trent Bridge like you usually do, then England may go with all quicks like they did against New Zealand in that test series. But I think they should include Jack Leach into the side. They need a spinner. They have Joe Root, but he's not a frontline spinner. Best to go with Leach, but depends on conditions. If it's in favour of the seamers, Robinson comes in. If not, go with Jack Leach for that spin option. That could be England's potential 11 for the first test match. Let's have a look at India's potential 11 for the first test match. Rohit Sharma, Rahul, Pujara, Kohli, Rahane, Pant, Jadeja, Ashwin, Ishant Sharma, Shami and Bumrah. India to keep the same team from the WTC final, except for Rahul coming in for Gill. Even if the conditions are in favour of the bowlers in terms of a green wicket at Trent Bridge, having the 2 spinners is India's strength. And once we get into the test match on days 4 and 5, we may see some spin, and it could be a handful for England's batsmen. India did receive some criticism for picking 2 spinners in the WTC final in conditions that suited the seamers, but India's strength is to play the 2 spinners, and I think they'll stick with that heading into this first test match. That could be India's potential 11 for the first test match. Who's going to win this first test match at Trent Bridge? I think India are going to win the first test match because they will be determined to bounce back after the World Test Championship final loss to New Zealand. They are a different side to one that toured England in 2018 and will want to get off to a good start in the first test match of the series. What are my thoughts on this series in general? This series is very important for both teams. It's important for England in terms of preparation for the Ashes later on this year, getting the right team combinations and looking to try different players out. Important series for Burns, Sibley, Crawley, Pope and Lawrence to score runs and book their place in England's Ashes squad. England looking to bounce back after the Test series loss to New Zealand, also to get points for the WTC in this new cycle. This series is also important for India to bounce back after losing the WTC final against New Zealand. They'll be determined to win this Test series in England and hopefully win their first Test series in England since 2007, which they won 1-0 in the best of 3 test matches. Also looking to get points to start the next cycle of the WTC, hoping to be back in the final in 2 years' time. Also looking to test themselves in these conditions in England, playing on surfaces which are so foreign to Indian conditions, looking to get better in these conditions and embracing this tough challenge. Who's going to be the leading run scorer and wicket taker for both teams? We'll start with England. Leading run scorer, I should say, will be Joe Root. Leading wicket taker, James Anderson. For India, leading run scorer, Virat Kohli. Leading wicket taker, Mohammad Shami. Who's going to win this series overall? I think India are going to win this series 3-2. India are the strongest of the 2 teams. If they can bat and negotiate these difficult conditions and put some runs on the board for their bowlers to bowl to, then I think there are a good chance to win their first Test series in England since 2007. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get the latest episodes of the podcast, and like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.